This week we've all been exposed to things that really should shock and appall us. We've seen shocking imagery of police brutality. We've seen shocking imagery of riots and destruction and violence. How do we respond to that kind of thing? This week's scriptures from morning and evening prayer actually give us quite a bit of wisdom and help in how to frame our own response. First of all, in Ezekiel, chapter 8 of Ezekiel, I remember reading this when I was a young child because there's something so viscerally appalling about the chapter. God invites Ezekiel in a vision into the very temple in Jerusalem. And in this temple there are all sorts of idolatrous and appalling practices going on. And one by one God shows them to Ezekiel and he says, "Have you seen this, O Son of Man? You will see still more abominable things than this." And Ezekiel is being invited to see and to recoil against it and still to see more. Not to shrink away, but to recognize just how bad it is. And once he sees this full vision of that which is shocking, then he's prepared for what will come, where God himself lifts up and moves his presence out of that temple, which has become full of such appalling sin. But the problem is, while we're invited to be appalled at sin, so often that turns into self-righteousness in us. And so in our gospel this week, we have Jesus meeting us in that self-righteousness and giving a parable about a Pharisee who goes into the temple, and in public prayer, he is now going to do some virtue signaling. And he says, "Oh, God, I thank you that I'm not like all of these other people, extortioners, unjust adulterers, like this tax collector over here." And then he speaks about how good he is in comparison. Jesus says it is the tax collector, the one who is appalled at his own sin, who goes home justified, not the Pharisee who's appalled at everybody else. So when we're being appalled at sin, we must be willing to turn and look at ourselves and ask, is that sin in us? Also, we see in the gospel, Jesus continues to meet people with grace. People who others are shocked by, he is willing to welcome and receive, like Zacchaeus, the tax collector. In Joshua, we see the same thing. The spies from Israel go to Jericho, and they meet this prostitute who welcomes them and shows faith in their God, and ultimately she's welcomed into the people of God. Grace meets people and invites them in, whatever the background may be. That grace going first and welcoming all is this theme in Acts, and the church must get used to it. We see in this week's readings, first of all, the Samaritan, these despised neighbors, are welcomed in, and the Holy Spirit comes down upon them. Then you have Saul, the persecutor of the church, who is not just forgiven, but invited to become a leader, an evangelist, an apostle in the church. And then the Roman Gentiles themselves are welcomed in, and the Spirit falls upon them in the same way the Spirit fell upon the original believers in Pentecost. The very people who would shock and appall them and make them recoil, they're now forced to welcome as brothers and sisters, sharing in the same Holy Spirit. So may God meet us. May we be rightly shocked at sin, but may we also be shocked at our own sin in the same time. And may we reach out always with grace. Always with grace. Amen.